These responses will be directed towards the basis arguments in the video, which are from the book by Sam Harris. I'll just get right to it. I will try to represent Sam Harris's arguments as best I can. It's possible I'll make a goof there, but as best I could tell, his first argument worked like this. It said human flesh is considered alive, but the person is considered dead when someone is brain dead. Brain dead humans, they may have some traumatic injury on a motorcycle or something. Okay, inference 1, therefore human flesh either has brain activity and is a person, or it has no brain activity and is not a person. Premise 2, human embryos that are 3 days old have no brain activity. Okay, conclusion, therefore 3-day-old embryos are not people, and therefore it's not murder if their life functions cease, or if they're terminated or killed. It's like killing a bunch of bacteria when you wave your hand through the air or something like that. Okay? Alright. First of all, we want to look at the options that the argument gives us. It gives us two options. It says living human flesh either has brain activity and is a human, is a person, or living human flesh has no brain activity and is not a person. And I want to introduce a third option. Is this option true? Living human flesh may have no brain activity and still be a person. Is it possible for human flesh to have no brain activity and still be a person? I mean, is that possible? In what cases would that be possible? And I'm not saying that's right, but should we consider it? And then the issue of the 3-day-old embryos, the idea is, I'm just going to read my response. Could there be relevant differences between brain-dead humans and 3-day-old embryos other than a lack of brain activity? One difference is the fact that the 3-day-old embryo could potentially have already gained a soul or personhood, but the brain-dead human could potentially have already lost a soul or personhood. One case is about gaining something while the other is about losing something. This is a critical difference. But what is the relevant difference between gaining and losing in these two cases? Well, one is never really sure whether either case has a soul or is a person. Perhaps brain-dead humans will one day be able to be resuscitated with better tools. We don't know. But we do know this. There is an end to life that we call death. We also know that life begins. So the question is not so much what do we know, but what do we do? What do we do? We look for indicators to make our best guess that something has already happened. Okay? In other words, we can't really tell if either of which has really, if the brain-dead human has actually lost the soul or personhood, and we can't tell if the 3-day-old embryo has gained it yet. We don't really know because we can't talk to them, we can't interact with them. They're both totally incapable of that. One is totally supported by machines, even their breathing and their heart rate is controlled by the machine, and the other is in the womb, and just a few cells. We can't interact with them. We can tell something when they're out, and we can talk with them, we can interact, we can do things with them, but it's hard to tell in these states, so we just don't know. But what we do know is that there is a beginning to life and there is an end to life. And the point is, we look for indicators to make our best guess about whether or not something has already happened. In the case of the 3-day-old embryos, we look for living flesh of any sort. But in the case of brain-dead humans, we look for brain death. Why do we look for such different indicators in these two cases? Because we are expecting different things to happen. What is consistent in treating these two situations differently is how we deal with the unknown. We look for indicators, we look for any fundamental change to which leads us to think that something has already happened. In one case, living flesh says to us that something has already begun, life, or human personhood, personal life. Whereas in the other case, brain death indicates to us that something has already ended. These are both could be or may be conclusions we reach, but we do know that we can preserve life to the point of raising babies. We also know that eventually a point comes where we really cannot preserve life. We call that final point death. Okay? Now, as best I can tell, Sam Harris makes a response argument that the Rational Response Squad takes very seriously, and it took me a while to understand it. Because at first I just heard the beginning of the video and I was confused, but then when I understood the context of where it falls in Sam Harris's book, it made a lot of sense for him to be saying that. And I'll just try to, it goes like this. This is like Sam's follow-up argument. Christians argue that since human embryos could potentially be persons, they must be protected. Premise 2, sperm or any human cell could potentially be persons. Sperm or any human cell. Conclusion, therefore Christians should also protect all human cells and sperm. So this is reduced to an absurdity. And again, the argument is not that human embryos could potentially become persons. That's a different, this is not the same thing. The argument is that human embryos could potentially already be persons, but cells and sperm only later. Finally, there's a final argument. As best I can tell, it says, premise 1, either 3-day-old embryos cannot split and fuse, or they do not have souls. Premise 2, 3-day-old embryos split and fuse. Conclusion, therefore 3-day-old embryos do not have souls. Now, can embryos split and fuse and also have souls? I think we need to consider this option. I think the argument just assumes it away, and we need to consider it. Is it possible? Well, if that were true, if they had souls, so let's say you had one soul and it split and all of a sudden there were now 2 souls. Well, why can't a new soul be present with that second that second situation? Big deal. I don't really see the problem there. Now, well, what if they refuse back into one? Again, why can't one of the souls die? It's not all that different if I were to take a kidney from somebody and put it into somebody else. The living flesh went into the other body, but the soul of the other person is gone, or the personhood of the other person is gone, however you want to look at it. It doesn't really present a problem unless you're going to make the argument from evil that souls dying in the womb is an evil. It would be the action of an evil God to allow that to happen. But of course, that problem is a lot. There's more to that. I mean, we have to ask that question about why anything would die. And most Christians are willing to believe that things can die and there still be a God. So there you have it.